Welcome back to Transfers, Tactics, and Targets, an off-season show where we preview what's in store next season for one specific team in the Premier League. Today, our focus is on defending champions Liverpool. Despite a miraculous debut for Arne that saw Anfield reclaim the throne of English football, letdowns in both domestic cups and an early exit in the Champions League left some fans wondering how much further this team could go without serious reinforcements. But luckily for the Scousers, FSG listened this year, already splashing big cash on Kerkez and Frimpong before breaking the English transfer record on Florian Wirtz, with even more signings potentially on the way. Still, with more expectations set up so high after this offseason, questions remain. Will the Reds repeat or even surpass last year, or will Slot turn out to be a one-season wonder? If you noticed, this isn't Darian speaking. For OG viewers, you'll remember that's me, Corey. For new viewers, I used to host many of our Premier League episodes, and while I haven't been on the channel in a while, I'm excited to be back. All right, how about let's start with some of the signings. All right, so this offseason, Liverpool has signed Florian Wirtz, they've signed Kerkez, they've signed Frimpong, and Mamardashvili. So, how about, does anyone of you want to talk about how these signings are going to turn out?
All right. Well, the first thing that comes to me is the fullbacks because we just talked in the last episode about how Man City is completely changing their strategy with fullbacks having a much more offensive style. We just saw PSG dominate the entire world basically by revolutionizing the way they use their fullbacks, and I definitely see the same thing going on with how Liverpool plans to use their fullbacks and with the signings they've made this year. So I have heat maps on the screen right now of Kerkez's season of where Kerkez has been on average throughout the season in the Premier League, as well as now Jeremy Frimpong. You'll notice that for both of these players, they spend about equal time in their own and opposition half, if not more in the opposition, especially for Jeremy Frimpong. For Milos Kerkez, this means that he probably won't be receiving the ball directly from Alisson or Mamardashvili as much, and he will be very, very direct in the offense. You also notice that both these players stretch directly by the byline, and that potentially could give space for some wingers, some attackers, midfielders, etc. And finally, you'll notice that these players have very good offensive stats for their positions as fullbacks. Milos Kerkez is actually pretty defensively solid. He won 60% of his ground duels, and he also has 2 goals and 5 assists in the Premier League last season, as well as Jeremy Frimpong, who I believe had something like 10 goal contributions in the Bundesliga last season.
Yeah, no, these are some pretty good signings we've got here. Our key three, Frimpong and Kerkez in the back. Of course, we've got Wirtz at the front. And I will say, Frimpong, Kerkez, they're going to add a lot of dynamism to this team. Similar to what we said with Man City earlier, where we had Kyle Walker leaving and they were bringing in replacements for him. And what we thought was that those replacements were going to add a lot of energy to the team, the kind of thing that I think we said unfortunately has been kind of missing from Pep's game. And so we can see some similar changes here with Liverpool, I'm sure. And Kerkez, I think especially, was a good transfer. A good price we got on him might have been around 40 million pounds. He will be a great solution to challenge and eventually replace a veteran and Andy Robertson. Of course, there are a few veterans that we're replacing this season, which we'll get to a little later, I think. And then there's the headline act as well. Florian Wirtz, obviously a massive transfer, 116 million pounds. I think he's going to make or break our season. But as far as we've seen, he is very much worth it. This guy's a runner, a connector, and someone who can score in the transition or break down the deep blocks. He's got so much utility to him. And if he settles, Wirtz is going to become the heartbeat of Slot's rebuild. I think Liverpool have not had a player this good between the lines since peak Coutinho, and this time they're not selling. They are properly building around him.
Dude, the way I see it, Florian Wirtz has the potential and is arguably already a more skilled player tactically than Philippe Coutinho, who is obviously a massive club legend for Liverpool. Florian Wirtz last season, I think, was like second or third most assists in the Bundesliga. He had 10 goals, 12 assists. Great contribution, great playmaking. And one thing I find very interesting about him is that depending on whether depending on how Leverkusen set up, he was very good at drifting out to the left, playing as a false nine, drifting back into the midfield. And I think the most interesting thing about the signing is he doesn't fit into any specific predefined role, any specific position that I think Arne Slot played last year. Like, he doesn't fit as a traditional striker. I think it would be kind of odd to place him in that midfield trio. So the question really is, what exactly does Liverpool have planned for Florian Wirtz coming into the season, which we're going to talk about in more detail later, of course. But obviously, when you're breaking the British transfer record, I think it's something like 125, 120 million euros on this player, you're not just doing it for no reason. Obviously, they have a huge plan with Florian Wirtz. I have my prediction for what that's going to be. You will as well. But I think somebody who has such good playmaking ability, such good technical ability, can really just do anything. I think if anything else, it will just relieve the pressure, even if he doesn't have that good of a season, on like the other very good attackers, like Mo Salah, like potentially Cody Gakpo, Luis Diaz, etc., the Liverpool already have. So it's going to be very interesting to see how good he is. But I think that even in a scenario where Wirtz is completely flops, I don't think it will be a huge waste of money, of course. But I don't think it will be as bad as like signing, for example, as the risk that City took when they signed Haaland, where because he was in such a predefined position, he just has to work the way he's being used, or else it's a complete flop.
Yeah, I mean, Verts, there's so many options that you have with this guy. And also, that it does pose its own challenge. I'll probably mention it later when we start to get into the tactics and maybe our starting 11 as well, because he is a guy that I think you need to build around. But it is great that there are so many ways that you can build around him. There's, just like what we said with Man City, these transfers are bringing so much depth and so much variety to Liverpool's play. And I know there's one other transfer we mentioned as well, because Liverpool's goalkeeper group has gone through a pretty big transformation, I would say. I mean, obviously Alisson, he's the undisputed number one, but the hierarchy underneath him has been restructured from top to bottom pretty much. Kelleher left and Mamardashvili has come in from Valencia. I think this transfer was made like a year or so ago, but it's just being finalized and paid out now. He's a proven top flight shot stopper and a Europa level veteran who is more than ready, I think, to step in if Alisson gets injured or needs to be otherwise rested. Um, you also have on the other end of the experience spectrum, Pecci, if I'm saying that correctly, maybe Pecci from Hungary. He is one for the future. He's just 20, and he's definitely going to be able to develop under Alisson and Mamardashvili, maybe playing some Carabao Cup minutes or potentially even going on loan. We do also have Freddie Woodman, who joined on a free. He's a classic domestic backup. He might not show up for many games, if any, but he is experienced, reliable, and a good presence in the dressing room. I think another thing that's really notable here is the blend of ages. You have Woodman at 28, Mamardashvili is 24, and Petshi is just 20. We have flexibility across all competitions, and we have a great lineup for the future. Bottom line, if Alisson is out for a week or even a month, we can now rotate without panic. Last year that wasn't always the case. This year we've really fixed that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Marmot really has a lot of experience already, and he's just 24 years old. Not only has he proven himself, as you were talking about, in the Europa League, in La Liga, etc., he was also really good at the Euros. I think like a year ago. And the fact that he's that young, the fact that I think, like Pesci, he's also going to continue developing under Allison, he seems to me like at least the plan. He is the planned future man in between the sticks after Allison leaves. And I think Allison, obviously, for how good he is, on his day, arguably the best keeper in the world, to be honest. The reason why we don't regard him that way is because he gets injured so much. So when he's your main guy, specifically, who you have as the backups is especially important. Last year, there was like a long stretch when Kelleher was the main goalkeeper for Liverpool because of Alisson's injuries. And although people like Kaibo made absurd statements suggesting he was the best goalkeeper in the Premier League, luckily he's not on this episode today. Obviously, Liverpool do want someone much more solid, and Mamardashvili definitely brings that out. Another good thing about him, I think, is that sort of similar to Alisson, they have very similar distribution styles, which, again, I'm going to talk about more in the tactics section. And I think that provides a lot more continuity to the Liverpool play, and it won't cause them to have to change their tactics as much as back last time when Kelleher was in the sticks compared to when Alisson was injured.
Yeah, honestly, it is a great transfer. Kelleher coming out, and we have now a great backup keeper once again. Kelleher had some good performances for us too, and I'm quite hopeful that Mamardashvili will be able to do the same for us.
It looks like Liverpool had some important signings, both big ones and also ones for depth, and but there are going to be high expectations. So let's see if they can live up to that. But on the other hand, Liverpool also had some losses this year. They also sold some players, and that includes Kelleher, as previously mentioned. They also sold a young depth player in Jarell Kwanzaa, and obviously the very big one, Trent Alexander-Arnold. So, what do you guys have to say about this?
The big change here has got to be no Trent for next season. I mean, losing him to Madrid was a seismic change because like say goodbye to all that creativity, chance creation, set piece mastery, rest in peace, corner taken quickly, or maybe not because we do have a strong replacement for him with Jeremy Frimpong at right back. But still, it is definitely a big change. He's been at the club for what, 10 years now? He was in the academy too. He's been around for a very long time, been a great presence. And I know there's lots of people that are quite angry with him still for the way he left the club. I mean I can't really argue with that. It was pretty sneaky the way he left, but I'm not gonna say either that like he hasn't made some great contributions to the team. And I guess we will just have to see how Frimpong is able to follow up because again Trent has done some great things, and so there are some quite big shoes to fill. And as well, with Trent going, you have seemingly Konaté trying to follow him along as well. So when we get to the potential players leaving, we're gonna have to see how that makes a difference too.
I don't want to be too divisive here, but I think in a sense, Trent had it coming. Not because of anything he did himself, but just the way Arne Slot used him last season is quite unusual for his caliber. I think the main criticism that people have of Trent, which is honestly quite reasonable, is that he's pretty bad defensively speaking. And back in the Klopp years, Klopp was totally fine with that. He was absolutely willing to sacrifice that defensive solidity on the right side because Trent was just so good offensively. But this year, I feel like Arne Slot was actually a lot more conservative with how Trent played, and that kind of weakened him quite a bit. Uh, Obviously, Frimpong, he's leaning into that. I think Arne wants somebody who will be very offensively minded, but because he wasn't happy with Trent being in that role, instead of continuing to nuzzle him, I think it's honestly a smart idea for Liverpool to replace him with somebody who fits the attacking fullback role, not in the way that Klopp would have wanted, but in the way that Slot wants. Frimpong, like, obviously, I don't think I expect him to even try to be very defensive, but Slot would rather have that, I think, than just continuing to play Trent. Now, obviously, Trent is a club legend. I don't want to diminish that. Many, many spectacular moments. Great set pieces, both corners and free kicks. Obviously, corner taken quickly, an iconic moment. But I think it was time to move on, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like that way. All right then. If that's really all you guys got to talk about the people that are leaving, let's talk about some people that they potentially might bring in. There's some rumors out here. They're not confirmed. They're not 100% like confirmed yet, but they could be happening soon, and that includes Ekitike, potentially Alexander Isak, potentially Rodrygo, and quite surprisingly, also it seems like Mark Guehi is on the table.
Here's the way I look at it. So, we saw at Liverpool, and obviously this stuff is like developing by the day, by the hour. So I don't even know what's gonna happen by the time this actually comes out. Like probably later today. We're recording this like morning Saturday, but right now it seems like Liverpool their main target is to get a striker. They basically try to threat to Newcastle essentially, almost like blackmail, basically saying either give us if you don't give us Isak, we'll sign Ekitike off you, and he'll leave again anyways or otherwise you just give us to him and then you get to keep Ekitike. So I think Liverpool's main objective right now is to sign a striker, and they just tried to like weasel their way into Newcastle to try to sign Alexander Isak. And the Rodrygo signing I think is quite interesting. Obviously Rodrygo played on like the right for for Real Madrid, but he is right-footed, and my guess is that if he does sign for Liverpool, Liverpool will intend to use him as a left winger. What I find interesting about this is that Liverpool's main choice is to get a striker, and their backup is to get a winger. Two different positions, and I'm not gonna spoil it too much, but my logical reasoning for that is because of Wirtz. I think they have two potential different plans for how Wirtz is going to set up in that team depending on who they sign. Most likely, in my opinion, Ekitike, because it looks like Isak is not particularly interested in leaving, which I know in like Premier League episodes before I've said like I don't think Isak should leave this year. Newcastle are back in the Champions League. They're like a big six club in England now. They have all the oil money in the world. Clearly, they've been making big moves themselves. And if I were Isak, I would just stay, become a club legend, and maybe you can win the Prem with Newcastle in a few years. But that's besides the point, though. I think it's pretty likely that Liverpool will go ahead and sign a striker because they've already spent like what 200 million and only sold like 50, 60 million worth of players, something like that. So how much cash are you gonna splash? How much cash do you have to splash to sign Rodrygo, right? Especially off Real Madrid. I just don't see that to be as likely.
And oil money's an interesting mention, actually. I've seen. Have you seen the rumors that he might go to Halal, Isak? I don't even know where this
See,
came
that's
from.
not happening. There's
It's
no
like
way.
it's not.
There's no way.
Let's be very realistic. Like I know Newcastle is Saudi owned and whatnot, but like I'm sure they're gonna keep him in Europe and like let him make publicity for them in the European leagues. I don't think they're just gonna bring an amazing player like that over so quickly. But anyways, yeah, search for a striker. Definitely the most important thing Liverpool have left in their transfer window. Because Nunez's fit under Arne Slot is still very uncertain. Honestly, his fit throughout the time he's been at the team has been kind of uncertain. So yeah, Liverpool are looking hard at those two potential replacements up top, Isak and Ekitike. Isak would be a blockbuster move. He has proven himself obviously in the Prem. He scored 21 goals was it for Newcastle last season, despite missing some time with injury. And the big question there is price. We're talking well over £100 million if Newcastle are even willing to sell. Then there's Ekitike. His initial loan off to Frankfurt didn't exactly blow the doors off, but he was great after his permanent transfer. And he's still young, and the tools are there. He's got height, mobility, and flashes of composure in front of goal. I think he really just needs a little time, and in the right environment, he can really grow. So the contrast is a bit stark there. Isak would be a near guaranteed starter. Ekitike I'm sure would also be a starter, but he would be more of a project. Depth for now, with the hope of developing him into a late game threat in the next few years. Either way, this search is telling us something clear. Liverpool want a more complete nine. Nunez might still have a future here, but the club is going to be very deep exploring other options. And if a deal comes together, especially for Isak, it could redefine the entire front line.
I mean, okay, listen, you're the Liverpool guy here. I'm a Leicester fan, so obviously I think I'm very curious to see what your mindset is. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen, but assuming they do go ahead and sign either Ekitike or Isak, who do you think they do go for? Who do you think they end up getting?
Okay, I was actually planning on bringing this up as a preface just before my starting 11, but yeah, I can talk about that. So, Nunez, like lots of weeks of talks with Napoli, we had to sell him. They didn't pay the price we wanted on him. Same for Atletico, because we signed him for like 75 million pounds, so there's bound to be some concern over the return. But I've actually seen some newer shouts of Nunez to Newcastle, and then having Ekitike come in from Frankfurt. And I think that deal, it works on multiple fronts. Newcastle were obviously interested in pairing Ekitike with Isak, and I think if Nunez doesn't play like shit, like he's not a bad replacement. They get a more traditional number 9 in that sense. And as for Liverpool, Ekitike gives us a more technically refined forward who suits Slot's front foot press and his combination play a lot better. And what that can also do is tactically, it'll shift Florian Wirtz probably into more of a number 10 role, and I think that can maximize some of his strengths, central creativity, quick feet, final third vision, without having to make things too rigid out wide either. So I think if we were to bring Ekitike in and send Nunez over to Newcastle, kind of doing a trade, in that sense, I think that would work out quite well for us. So I would say we don't pay the extra money for Isak, and instead we just grab Ekitike and I guess give Nunez to Newcastle as compensation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's probably the more likely outcome. Not only, as you were saying, do I think Ekitike is a better fit than Isak, where Isak is basically going to be a target man. He's not going to probably press nearly as much as Ekitike, and having Ekitike frees up a lot more space. and this creative ability for Wirtz and Salah. I think that does make more sense. And like also from Newcastle's perspective, Isak is perfectly happy to stay here. You're building a project. I just don't see why you would sell your best player. This doesn't make sense. Even if you're getting like 120 million, Isak is the cornerstone of this Newcastle rebuild. I agree with you. I think Ekitike is happening. I don't think Rodrygo is really even in the cards at all. But then there's one more player. Obviously, you guys have sold Joao Kwanzaa. You might even sell Konaté. So there have been shouts that you might sign Mark Guehi. Do you think that's gonna happen?
I think it will. I've just it's there's been so much news around Konate, and like I don't know how much of it is just media blur, like fucking Sky Sports talking shit. But it's like I think it is very clear he wants to go. And I don't know that we can stop him at this point. It's unfortunate, but it's like there was very little we could do to get Trent not to leave. Like this shit was set up for a few years, and I have to imagine it was probably the same with Konate. It's really unfortunate because like the back line was so strong with Van Dijk and Konate last year, but I don't think there's much we can do there. So I think we're the best thing we can do, and what I think the club probably will do, is to try and get a favorable leave for him, and then probably take Guehi depending on how much like Crystal Palace are willing to give him up for, but probably Guehi would be the solution there.
Yeah, I think that does make sense as well. I also imagine Gahey would probably be a relatively good value pick in terms monetarily speaking. And since Liverpool are like already 140 in the hole, they're gonna sign a Ekitike that puts them more in the hole. Uh, Even if you sell a Diaz and a Konate, for example, like you can't spend all too much on a new starting center back. So I think Gahey is probably the best option you have out there.
All right, then. I guess we'll see what happens because this is shaping up to be quite an impressive transfer class for Liverpool. But obviously, if these potential signings do occur, it could change things even more. And obviously, we'll just see what happens over the next couple of weeks and see how it turns out. Now, let's talk about some potential sells. I think we've already talked about Konate. We talked about Nunez a little bit. But there's one name that's also out there, and that is Luis Diaz. They could be it could be either Nunez or Diaz ending up going. So, what's up with that?
It's about a 50-50 chance, honestly, of either happening. And I would say that Nunez is probably a little bit more likely because I'm thinking about it in terms of like backup wingers. If you sell Diaz, you're really short on options there. You could play Gakpo potentially, but that's about it. If you get rid of Nunez, you still have Chiesa. You still have that one other guy on the Liverpool bench whose name I can't remember right now, and then you'll have Ekitike. I think that makes a lot more sense. And obviously, Wirtz can play there as well potentially. You could have like other people. You could really do a lot of switches with that. So I think Nunez is probably more likely. Also, like you have to consider Diaz has I think been a very solid player for Liverpool, whereas Nunez has been somewhat of a flop. So I think Nunez is probably a better value sell from Liverpool's perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, if I just mention again that little potential trade we had happening, like that could happen with Newcastle, I think the way that transfer works out, it just works better. Because what is it? Diaz, he's trying to go to Bayern, it seems like, but it's hard to say what comes next if we sell him there. Whereas if we go to Newcastle, like maybe if we offer them Nunez, they're more willing to give up on Ekitike, and that can make that transfer a little easier for us, and we'll kind of just have a trade going. So I think that works out better. I think Diaz's main issue was pay. His salary, it's 55,000 pounds a week. It is pretty low. I think it's significantly below what you would expect for a player of similar stature anywhere in like top European football. So I mean, I get the concerns from him for sure, especially when we've been paying so much for transfer fees. Like we just broke the record with Wirtz. We could potentially break it again with Isak. I get the concern from him. We're gonna have to see how it goes, but I think Liverpool, they should do their best to keep Diaz around and just sell Nunez instead.
All right. Yeah. We'll see if any of that occurs. It's definitely a topic these days, especially this off season. Right now, I feel like it's time to move on to talk about a little bit of tactics. Obviously, with players coming in and players leaving, it's gonna change the tactics a little bit. And also, I'm sure Arne Slot wants to push Liverpool to the next level. So, what are some changes they can really make to improve their tactics?
Okay, I think the obvious one is definitely regarding the fullbacks, right? So, uh, like honestly, Slot has like been more pragmatic than Klopp, so that means. But with the signings of Kerkez and Frimpong, it's pretty obvious what he's trying to do. He's going to push those fullbacks high, and not only will they be pushed high, Kerkez and especially Frimpong are not going to start from goal kicks in goalkeeper's range. In other words, I don't think Allison will be doing short passes to those fullbacks. They're going to try to start in the midfield and then push up forward because if you look at the heat maps, especially Frimpong's heat map, he barely spends any time in the position where you would expect a right back to be. He has an completely identical heat map to a right winger, and he is not going to be there to receive the ball from Allison or Mamardashvili. So then, what's going to happen is if unless a midfielder pulls back, you just have those two center backs as really the only passing targets for Liverpool. So I think what's probably going to happen is one of the midfielders, most likely Gravenberch, I think, is going to have to come back and play as a third center back, at least on the offense. And then the other thing with that is that I think even in general, even if you do that, you're gonna have to be a lot more conservative with what the other midfielders are doing. And because again, like even if you just have Gravenberch there, he's not a center back. He's not a defender. He can't perform the task that we're going to be asking Virgil van Dijk and I'm guessing most likely Mark Guehi. So that's why I don't see like Wirtz, for example, playing as an attacking midfielder because that could throw Liverpool completely out of rhythm and just make them very vulnerable to counters. So like yeah, there's a big question about what's happening to Wirtz. I think there's a big thing about like the about the fullbacks, but I think the obvious solution is you have to drop Gravenberch back on goal kicks. That would mean that again Liverpool still have the advantage, three potential passing options vs usually two strikers countering, and then because you have those fullbacks so high, it allows Liverpool to maintain a lot of pressure on the wings on the offense. So I guess like offensively, you know how like Chelsea do like a 3-1-6 or a 4-1-5. I'm expecting like a 3-2-3-2. Gravenberch is probably going to have less of an impact, which is fine given the new personnel they're signing in. You'll have the other two midfielders, of course, and then I think, yeah, or 3-2-2 I should rather say, and then you'll have the wing backs pushing forward as well as the three strikers. You could even see the similar to Chelsea. You just have all five of the offensive players all on like the same line depth as each other, which will make it easier to overwhelm the opposition. And you basically play like five defensively minded players and five offensively minded players. Kind of similar, honestly, to how Leverkusen play.
Dude, I swear we've just stolen Leverkusen's whole roster, and it's like, okay, you can have Kwanzaa back, and we're taking half your team. Thank you very much. Anyways, though, like with City, which we saw in our last video, Liverpool's changes they focus quite heavily on the fullback roles. You have Frimpong bringing athleticism and width on the right that Trent didn't rely on as much, and on the left, Kerkez is going to be again a real competitor to Robbo. He showed overlapping instincts and defensive guts when he was at Bournemouth, and he can balance Salah's forward thrusts with solid cover behind. I'm gonna pull up that Frimpong heat map again. It's crazy, and it's like these guys, they're gonna be able to stay wide, stretch the pitch. They can push up, create natural overloads, which also lets the midfielders step up from deeper without being forced wide in order to free up pressing space. And I think, like while again this focus on the back flanks has been seen with City as well, I think that unlike with City where their changes were able to create some more chaos and expressiveness, these changes at Liverpool could do the opposite and instead add some more structure to the team. We've got the fullbacks staying wide, they're pushing up the sides, and the midfielders can kind of just do their thing in the middle, go down those passing lanes.
All right.
I think the other question I think for the way Liverpool are going to set up, obviously, is now what's going to happen with Florian Wirtz. Because again, I don't see him working in that midfield. like you're saying, it allows the midfield and kind of forces them to be more deep lying. But are you really telling me that Wirtz is gonna play as like a defensive or central midfielder, play as like Jordan Henderson 2.0? That just makes absolutely no sense to me. So here's now the question: you could have him playing as a striker alongside Ekitike, but then do we trust Kerkez or Robertson, who I think have very similar profiles actually, to fill up the left, or do you, despite the fact that Wirtz has never played as a left winger before, play him as a left winger? And I think that's actually the solution. I think Arne Slot is absolutely cooking something devious, and he's going to play Florian Wirtz, a traditional number 10, on the left wing, because with Kerkez and Frimpong hugging the touchlines, essentially, Wirtz is going to have so much space to cut in centrally. And with someone like Ekitike, who also loves to be an anchor, do hold a play, not just like a complete poacher, it allows Wirtz again and Salah to cut in inside and just be central. Like we see, like Salah, he already loves to cut inside despite the fact he starts on the right touchline, and that's going to allow Wirtz to essentially play in a very similar role as he did for Bayer Leverkusen, despite the fact he technically has a different position. Because again, I said this a bit before, but Wirtz loves to drift on the left for Bayer Leverkusen, and especially when he plays for the German national team. So that's actually, I think, the role that he's going to be playing. And it's going to be more of like a left forward and for Salah right forward than the traditional two-winger system. I see Wirtz, Ekitike, and Salah being basically at the same line. And it'll be almost like playing it'll basically be like playing three forwards and not having a complete striker, which is actually a system that Liverpool are very comfortable with. This is like the system that they played with Mane, Firmino, and Salah, right? So that's what I see happening. I think that's what they're going with. That's my guess, and my guess is that the alternative is they sign Rodrygo, then you have Wirtz playing as a striker. But I don't think, unless you have Wirtz playing as a false nine, I don't think he would be an amazing poacher or an amazing target man. Just because, again, I think his best role is playmaking.
Dude, I know you said when before we started recording this episode that you were gonna have some crazy takes, and the thing is, like, if that's your crazy take, I honestly don't even mind that. I can absolutely see left wing here. I can see Arne Slot bringing him into a just brand new position, because like Wirtz, he rarely influences the system. He's a great prospect for sure, but he needs a system that's built around him well. Slot, he has a real challenge here, because if you have, say, a 4-2-3-1, Wirtz can fit pretty naturally as the central 10, but that's going to put pressure on Szoboszlai, who would have to maybe shift deeper into the pivot or be moved out wide. And even if you try them together, like, something else has to give. We've got great talent here. Mac Allister, Gravenberch, Curtis Jones. Not all of them can stay starters. You have two players here with similar creative tendencies, and that can create overlap more than synergy. Ultimately, I think it's a good headache to have, like, because we have midfield flexibility here, and the team has unpredictable structure on the fly. It's something that Slot excelled at in Feyenoord and was maybe missing late in Klopp's era, but it is still a headache because there's no obvious fit for all these players.
Okay,
Liverpool.
Here's the thing, though, right? With all due respect, you may not think it's crazy, but everybody in Liverpool right now, not everybody, but a lot of Scousers online are saying Wirtz is our number 10 solution. He is going to be the player in the midfield that provides all the creativity. I don't think people are understanding just how offensive those fullbacks are. You cannot have 6 offensive players while you're on the offense, because that's going to force like Mac Allister and fucking Gravenberch to play as center backs, which that's just not what they are. So, like, I just imagine, like, when the first team sheet comes on for Liverpool, I don't know what friendlies they have before the Premier League, when they see Wirtz as a left winger, like, people are going to riot.
Yeah, I will say as well, just right now, I do have Wirtz at the number 10. But again, it's
Okay.
like I've been saying, there's just so many options with this guy, and like I do think he's gonna he's gonna be in the number 10. But I can't argue with your assessment, honestly. Like, no matter what formation you choose here, some people are gonna be pushed out of their natural roles. So really, what it is, it's a matter of figuring out how your placement of Wirtz is going to affect all these other guys, and I guess just trying to find out the best placement that has the Best effects for Wirtz, of course, but also the least negative effects on everyone else. And it's a massive balancing game, and I'm sure it's going to be difficult for Slot. Arguably, it could be his biggest tactical challenge so far at Liverpool. I think it is, really. It did such a massive transfer, such a massive player, and you've got to fit him in well. But I have faith in Slot. I think he can get it done. Well, he'll
I
find the
mean,
optimal solution.
yeah. I should
What?
point out though. I should point out
Yeah.
though, by the way. Again, I'm not. This is not what I would. This is not how I would line up Liverpool. This is my prediction for what Arne Slot is doing. And yes, I have to consider this. Liverpool would not break the British transfer record to get this number 10 playmaker and then try to break the British transfer record again on a striker, you know? Like, I feel like the only reason you would spend that much money is if you had a role for him where he is like that guy in his positioning and everyone fits around him. And that would just, like, it wouldn't, if you play Wirtz in a number 10 position and then you sign Isak, this is less of a concern for Ekitike, but because they are actively trying to go for Isak as well. If you have Florian Wirtz in that number 10 position and you also have Isak, then Wirtz is not the focal point anymore.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, like one of the ways that Slot convinced Wirtz to actually join was with the tactical plan. Like I'm pretty sure has a very clear plan on how he is going to get Wirtz integrated. I'm sure this is not like a last minute thing that he's thinking up. And honestly, man, like it's hard to say what he's gonna go for. Again, just so many options. But I'm just gonna keep my faith in whatever starting 11 he brings into that first game, and we'll just see how it goes.
All right, so speaking of starting 11, I think you guys are like kind of getting into that already. So I want to see what you guys have for your predictions of how that starting 11 is going to look like and what type of formations, how will Arne Slot figure out um, how to best utilize his starting 11 players.
All right, I basically have mine written down already. So my prediction is 4-2-1-3. Kerkez or Robertson as the starting left back. They have identical play styles, so they can easily just rotate within each other. Virgil van Dijk, Mark Guehi, and Frimpong. And then, as I was saying before, to balance that, you're going to have Mac Allister drop back more. You're going to have Gravenberch continue to play as a defensive midfielder. And I think they keep Szoboszlai there because he's been very effective. We haven't talked about him so much. But again, because I don't see Wirtz being able to just drop back that much, I like to keep Szoboszlai. And I think it would actually be good continuity-wise for Liverpool to continue the midfield that they had the last season. So I predict that midfield to stay the same. And for my attack, it's Wirtz and Salah to play as like a left forward and a right forward, not wingers, traditionally speaking, but more inverted wingers. And I have Ekitike starting as the starting striker.
Damn, okay, a 4-2-1-3. You want to guess what formation I've got?
I don't, dude. Like a, okay, I don't even know. Like a, I
It's
maybe a 4-4-2.
it's
I could
somewhat
see you
similar to
playing
it's
Salah
no no no.
sometimes.
It's more similar to yours. It's more similar to
Okay.
yours, but quite different at the front. I've actually got a 4-2-3-1, and
4-2-3-1.
it might be somewhat unoriginal with Slot because the thing is, this is a formation he leaned towards in his days at Feyenoord and for some time with Liverpool as well. But I think with the players that we have here, again, we're making assumptions because not all these transfers are done. Like we're saying, oh, probably Ekitike is coming in. Who knows if Isak shows up as well? And if it's like a £120 million transfer, like that's going to make a big difference. And obviously he's an influential player too, so you'd have to work that out. But I think with the players that we're predicting are here, it makes sense. So like I'm gonna have Ekitike leading the line. He's not a like for like replacement for someone like Nunez, but he is smoother in build up and he can drift wide as well to open up some space for Szoboszlai and for Wirtz. And speaking of Wirtz, he's right behind at the 10. I know I said that earlier. At Leverkusen, he was most dangerous when he was allowed to float, link play, drag defenders, and in this system, he will have full license to do that. Out wide, I mean, it's got to be Salah, right? I think he's still arguably the best right winger in the world. And don't talk about some Lamine Yamal. He's getting there, but he's not the best yet. And on the left, I do still like Luis Diaz as the starter. I know I said earlier we should try and keep him around. But if he does leave for Bayern, there are those talks of bringing in Rodrygo now. And you can also have Gakpo rotating in off the bench as well. Though I don't think Gakpo would quite be starter level. So I would say if not Diaz, then bring in Rodrygo and have him there. Then for the midfield, I've got a double pivot, Szoboszlai and Mac Allister. Against stronger teams in Europe, you could swap in Gravenberch, or even Endo to reinforce the base.
So
But
you're putting Gravenberch on the bench?
I am actually, yes.
This is Premier League Young Player of the Year, best defensive midfielder in the Prem last season, and
It
Swapnil is
it
putting him on the bench.
it is a big shout, yes. But I mean, you could get him in there.
That's a
You
crazier
could.
shot than what I said, honestly.
No, I know it is. You could get him in there, but just like day to day, I like Maka Sobo as the default pairing. But again, like we have so much midfield strength now. Absolutely, you can bring in Gravenberch, get him in there. And then for the back line, I think that's the place where things are really going to change, right? Because we have my Kerkez on the left. Robertson is still a great servant, but Kerkez is just more dynamic right now. And then on the right, I think Frimpong is a lock. I mean, what a signing! He is practically, like you said, a winger in possession, and he will give us the kind of vertical overloads that can just torment deep blocks. At center back, you've got to have Van Dijk there. He's still the rock. And if he sticks around, I'll put Konaté next to him. They've got chemistry. Like I said, they did great last season. And Konaté's physical profile complements Virgil's reading of the game really well. But unfortunately, it seems highly likely that he leaves at this point. So I'll tip Guehi to come in and replace him. And then the goalkeeper, no surprises here. It's Alisson between the sticks. He's still the best 1v1 keeper in the world. The only question is just how many games he's actually going to play. Because there has been some talk about giving Mamardashvili or Pechi some more time in domestic cups, but I think for those big games, it's still going to be Alisson there. So what that means is then I've got Alisson in between the sticks, Frimpong at right back, Van Dijk, Guehi, Kerkez, Mac Allister and Sobo in the midfield, and Wirtz, Salah, Diaz, maybe Rodrygo, and then Ekitike at striker.
All right, that sounds like quite a list. Quite a starting 11. We'll see if these transfers do come in, and if that is what it ends up becoming. Obviously, Arne Slot, his mind is probably thinking at like a different level than a lot of us, so we never know exactly what he's going to do, but we'll see. Yeah. Right now, I feel like it's a good time to move on to talk a little bit about the expectations for Liverpool next season. Let's talk about their targets. What are their goals? What do they want to achieve domestically and in Europe? So I think let's start domestic. What are their goals in the Prem and in the FA Cup and so on?
Their goals are very clear domestically. First off, you win the league this year, because if you win the league last year by the margin that Liverpool did, basically having it locked in by April, and then you make all these signings, again, break the British transfer record, like, there's no way you would do that and then not expect to contend again.
Yeah, we
So
can't
that's
do all this. We can't do all this and then make it closer than it was last year.
You can't
It's
do
not
all
gonna
this to
work out.
finish in third, dude. That would
That
actually
would
be
be
a disaster.
embarrassing.
And then I think the other thing is Liverpool completely flopped, with all due respect, in the domestic cups. I know Carabao. The interesting thing with Carabao is it happened directly after you guys played a match in Anfield against PSG that went 120 minutes and into penalties. But it does also show depth concern, and I think Liverpool is trying to cover that a little bit more. You're gonna lose Diaz, Diaz or Nunez. You've unfortunately lost tragically Diego Jota, and so if you sign Wirtz, you have to get Ekitike in as well, and then I guess youth players get more of a shout there, and then also strengthening the defense. I think that's probably gonna help you guys have the depth to either win Carabao or FA Cup, at least as a goal. I'm not sure if you actually do it, because I mean, there's a lot of higher mid-table teams that have that as a primary objective, and then you have City also strengthening their depth. You have like Chelsea doing the same thing. It's gonna be very tough, but the goal has to be Premier League and the Domestic Cup this year.
Yeah, I agree. We've got to get at least one cup in our hands. And definitely the Prem, not even a question. I mean, we had a dominant season last season. We kept level with other teams at the top of the table to start. I know we faltered for a little bit, but like really quickly we took the lead from City. Must have been the 6th or 7th match day, and we never looked back. And again, we faltered at the end of the season, but that was only after battering Tottenham 5-1 in order to seal the title. So now it's about proving that last season was not a one-off. It is very clear FSG and Slot are not messing around. They're spending everything they think they need to. And we're readying ourselves for another dominant domestic year. So what do we need? First, Salah, sensational season, 47 goals and assists, and keeping him and the forwards firing is going to be job number one. The attack chemistry needs to stay lethal. And obviously that's going to be especially important now that we have Wirtz coming in, and we've got to kind of plan around him as well. Defensively, keep the goals conceded obviously as low as you can, but I think below 30 is the internal goal. Again, when Van Dijk and Konaté started together last year, they showed how strong the back line can be. And also, those early months matter, because like I said, we did good in the early months last year. We kept up with everyone else at the top of the table. We took the lead pretty early on. So strong form in those first few months could mean the difference between being able to defend the season well, like we did last season, or dropping off potentially even earlier than we did last season and maybe having some problems holding on to the title. Then you have the Cups, they're in the mix, but they'll be weighed against the league commitments. And I think Slot will trust his squad depth and he'll expect some more fringe players to step up when called upon for these knockout competitions. Ultimately, Liverpool want the Prem, Cups are welcome, and again, I think arguably we need to win one. But what we are really expecting is another dominant league season, and I think we have more than a strong enough roster now to pull that off. And hopefully win a cup as well.
Yeah, the expectations are incredibly high for Liverpool domestically, and they'll have a lot of pressure on them to perform. But they will also have a lot of pressure on them for their competitions in Europe. Last season with the Champions League, it was quite an early exit. Obviously, PSG was an incredibly dominant team. But still, there's pressure on Liverpool to perform and get further this year than they did last year. And and what do you think their real objective is there? I think it's fairly obvious they do want to win.
I think the objective is the trouble because
Yeah,
their objective is to do a PhD last year, honestly. Because I think there were shouts. I mean, I think up until like January of 2025, I had Liverpool as the best team in the world, and with all these new signings, I mean, I don't know what PSG has. PSG even made any like big transfers yet? I don't even think so.
I
I
do
think
not
there's a
believe so.
it's very reasonable to say that Liverpool are the best team in the world. And if you're the best team in the world, then by default your goal is a trouble, right? I don't care. It's the Premier League. It's the hardest league in the world. That's definitely that has to be the goal. And again, I feel like Liverpool do have the depth to potentially do it at least. I'm not saying they will. So yeah, it has to be winning the Champions League.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, do I think that we're a deadlock to win UCL? No, but I think that is the expectation, for sure. Because, well, there's quite a lot to make up for with last season. That early exit still stings, even if it was to ultimately the team of the season. We did top the league phase table after all, and so now we at the very least need a final run this season. It is still pretty hard to ask for. Like we've said in previous episodes, UCL, maybe not so many games, like not as much of a match load, but every game is difficult. Every game is a fight for your life. And so it's going to be very important that our players are prepared for these UCL nights. And fortunately, we have players that have, like Wirtz, that have been brought in for nights like these. Group stage drama, knockout drama, late goals under the lights at Anfield. I think we've got the roster for it. And while fixture congestion was a concern last year, as it was with every competitor, with a deeper midfield than last season and additions in other places, I think Slot can manage things better this time around. There were lots of expectations on us last year. I mean, people saw us at the top of the Prem and UCL tables and expected a treble immediately. We didn't deliver, and maybe we shouldn't have been expected to, but we definitely should be now. And winning the league was historic, but going deep in Europe is what really makes you feared. So that has got to be the next step for Slot.
All right. These targets are obviously high. Do you think that Liverpool will match them?
I mean, I think we've got the Prem. Like I said, UCL, it's harder to call. I mean, look at PSG. I don't remember exactly where they placed at the end of the group stage. Like, I know for a while they were out of the playoff spots entirely, but look at the kind of turnaround they had. So it's just kind of hard to say when you've got knockout competition and it's with all these other teams all across the continent. you can't say for sure like who's going to have a great performance in one game and could cause you trouble, potentially be a risk of knocking you out early on, like we saw with PSG against Liverpool. But again, the expectation is finals, and I think even if we don't get finals, I'm sure we can go further now than we did last season.
I'm just gonna make it quick. I know we have our prem predictions, so just to quote the special man himself, I will not speak. If I speak, I will be in big trouble.
All right, sounds good.
Fair enough.
Is that all we have to say for this? I mean, we've talked about transfers, we've talked about the tactics, and now we've talked about the expectations, the targets that Liverpool have for this season. I think that just about does it for this episode. All right, so thank you everyone for watching, and we hope make sure to like, make sure to comment, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yep, we'll have a new video, I'm sure, with the next team, just continuing this series on. So do keep watching throughout the off season, and we will have more videos to come on more Prem teams and how they'll do next season.
All right, see ya.